today wasn't really an option because she'd already let people know I was doing this. So I just hope I can do her justice with this one. Jan Louise. She could make sense out of chaos and find meaning in a maze. She dreamed in possibilities. She charted her own way. She lived a life that mirrored the convictions she held dear. She met the world at its own door, and she did it without fear. She forged a path that others told her she could never make. Unapologetically, she did it her own way. She ministered to those in need. She gave to those without. She spoke for those who had no voice, compassionate throughout. She strived to make this world of ours a better place to live. She gave her time. She gave herself. She gave all she could give. Dedicated, genuine, beautiful, and bright, she lived her life. She lived out loud. She fought for what was right. I know that we will greatly miss her humor and her smile, how she listened without judgment, and her legendary style. But more than what we'll miss of her is what we get to keep, the strength she gave to each of us, the wisdom that ran deep. So much of her is echoed in the legacy she gave, the lives she touched, the world she changed, the family she made.
Better have some cleaners.
Call me up next, they take up the straw.
Yes.
Oh, boy. I'm not done yet. All right. Jan, you're going to hear today, and those that you know her, you know all the good virtues about her. I've known her since knee high. But I really didn't get to know her until the end. There's a few pastors in the room. And when I go to church, I listen to, 20-minute sermons and scriptures, and it's all about the pastor telling individuals that have to have faith. Faith is in you, bring it out of you, and I encourage you to have your faith. You could have made it a lot easier if you'd have just said, go put that girl over there in the back room, because that's all she had. I was telling my family, it was like watching a film. It was a movie I didn't really see.
Yeah.
It was like a John Wayne movie. Jan being John Wayne, of course. If you remember John Wayne, when he did get shot or whatever, he would tell his men, carry on, don't worry about me. Continue on, get the objective done. And the only difference, I've said many a times, many of you that know me and Jan, we were politically opposite. So if there's the political path to heaven, we've got a different road. But one thing we did do, and I understood Jan because Jan was a very good communicator. A good communicator is a good listener. One thing Jan and I had in common, you could take a group of people, and if there was a few people in that group that did not deserve the attention of society, Jan saw that whole group as something in need. But what Jan did is she had the ability to pick out the few that needed the umbrella during that big storm. And she would always reach out and help those few that wanted help. And therefore she accepted an entire group. Where if an individual like myself would look at that group and say, come on, do it on your own. But Jan always had that helping hand. And my kids and my sister, my wife always knew I called Jan Clara Barton for years. And she really fit the mold. And we're gonna miss her. But one thing Jan left behind is a good boy, and a good husband, and a good husband's family. And I told Jan, I told her,
Oh boy.
when she asked me to perform certain things for her, which I did everything I could. I told her that when her eyes closed, my eyes would be open wider for those closest to her. And that's a promise I have to her. And now I'll give it to my stronger sister.
Can you do it for my mom and dad?
I got a big hanky, but I can't do that. I'll stand up there with you just in case you would. We're not too good at this.
Our first time. Well, for those of you who do not know me, I'm Susan, and I'm Jan's sister. You better give me the title. And I wanted to make this a happy time because I wanted to tell you some things you may or may not know about Jan. First of all, I'm her older sister by 4 years. So when Jan came into my life, I was like, where's the puppy? And as we grew up together, I learned quite a few things about her. First of all, how she got her name. The J in Jan is for my father, Jim. And the A-N is for my mother, Ann. We're not sure where the Louise came in. Maybe Pete knows that. But we have nobody in our family named Louise. And Jan probably asked at some point, you know, how did I get this name? But she never really told me. When my mom was pregnant with Jan, she ate a lot of peanut butter. With me, it was coffee. I hate coffee. Well, apparently my mother must have ate jars of Skippy because Jan never did like peanut butter, and she did not eat peanuts. But even though she totally disliked peanut butter and couldn't even stand to smell it, she made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for her son Joe for school, holding her nose, because I would watch her, and peanut butter cookies for Joe and his friends, who would come over to the house. One of the things I remember growing up with her is she got a Christmas present that was called Tim the Bear. And it was a nice bear. It was, you know, should have blessed pretty long, I think. Jim remembers even Tim the Bear. Yeah. We kind of, you know, abused Tim the Bear because, you know, brothers and sisters, they kind of do those kind of things. But Tim never left her side until he fell apart. And, you know, sometimes that's what we would do. We'd hide Tim the Bear, and we'd play hide and seek with him until our mother made us stop. I know a lot of you know that Halloween and costumes was one of her favorite things to do. Halloween being one of her favorite holidays, along with Christmas, Thanksgiving, and everything else. And she always dressed up. Well, when Joe was 4, she called up my sister-in-law, Sherry, and she said, come on over to my house. I've got this assembly line set up, and we're going to make dinosaur costumes for the 3 boys, DJ, Joe, Robert, and Carrie, her niece. So they made these dinosaur costumes for the kids. The kids loved them. And actually, when they put them on, they all went out in the living room and they all had a big fight with the dinosaur tails, as kids would do. She made 3 green ones and she made a pink one for Carrie. The Kids loved it. Like I said, they had the dinosaur tail roar. One time, you might have seen this costume. She put on a full gorilla costume. I mean, full gorilla costume. Poor Pete was in bed. Pete, and all he saw was this huge gorilla head looking down at him. About gave him a heart attack. That was Jan, you know. That was her thing. Even this year, she dressed up as the Easter Bunny and delivered eggs to her church and her church children, which were so important to her. And later that day, she went to her nephew's home and did the same thing, playing the Easter Bunny. She loved it. She loved the costume. She loved dressing up. Jan really never sang a note. She was never in the high school choir or anything like that until she had that first bout with cancer. She found that her voice had changed, and she joined the church choir and the Gateway Singers. And she loved every minute, she loved every song, especially the patriotic ones. And she'd come down to Florida and she'd sing them for us, solo. You know, we didn't have any music or anything from me and from my mom and dad. Jan went to nursing school in Deaconess. And it was that time at one of those diploma schools, which you just don't see anymore. Most nursing schools are now college. And the first semester, the nuns thought that she didn't have what it took to be a nurse. And so they kicked her out. Well, you know, obviously they were very wrong. So one day Jan calls me up, she says, guess what? This was when she was state representative and she president of the Missouri Nurses Association and quite in a few activities. Well, the Deaconess nursing school called her up and said, we would like you to come and speak to our graduating class. Well, she just loved that. You know, and they wanted her to speak about nursing and legislation because that was one of her passions, was doing what she could for nursing in the legislature, making it better for all nurses. And she got up there and she gave her speech. I don't know if Pete and Joe were there, but at the end of it, she said, you know, don't get discouraged. I went to this nursing school. They kicked me out. Now, I don't know if any of the nuns there were the same ones, you know, that were there that said she didn't had what it take to be a nurse. But probably that was one of her best moments. Was going to that school. Jan was a community health nurse. She, after Bosnia had all of those problems, St. Louis took in a lot of the refugees, as you well know. Jan was down there working with them. A lot of them did not speak English. So Jan learned Bosnian so she could communicate with them. Just so, you know, they would have someone that they could talk to. She was a baby nurse. You know, she took care of mommies and little babies at risk and mommies at risk. Like Jim said, she was a 21st Clara Barton, and she made a difference in many lives. Jan loved to sew. She loved to cook. Her latest project, after she retired from nursing, she made these signature outfits for Barbie dolls. Pete would go to his flea markets and his garage sales. He'd bring home these naked Barbie dolls, and Jan would dress them to the nth or whatever. She would send me text messages, because I do live in Florida. She did Grease, which was the Danny and Sandy together dancing. She did Cleopatra, and she did many beautiful brides. She donated a lot to the church for auctions. She was quite the seamstress. I am a grandmother, and I tried to sew Barbie doll clothes. I don't know if any of you have tried to sew Barbie doll clothes, but it's next to impossible. Those dolls are very tiny. To get the clothes just right. So she was quite the artist. I think what we're going to miss the most is her turkey rice soup after Thanksgiving. She would pick that turkey to the bone, and she would make turkey rice soup, you know, that would last for days. When she came down to Florida a couple times for Thanksgiving, she did the same thing. As the church knows, and some of you know, her specialty were those grape pies after the Missouri Concord grapes came.